I can assure you that when you merge districts, this is all very real. And if you put an hour amount behind the transition and the amount of time it takes, it's a lot.
Can I ask in that regard, when you did this, because you sounds like you've been through a few mergers, you had 3 years to do from beginning to end?
Well, in both cases, they took about 3 years from when we started to the end.
And did you find that that was a sufficient amount of time to do all of what you've
Well,
outlined
there's
here?
never enough time to do everything, right?
Right.
We know that. I mean, it was time crunched, so it was hard. In particular, the second one I described. In one, it was Mount Mansfield. It was a supervisory union with 6 town school boards, and then the high school, middle school board, and then that became one district, and that was very clean. In this other situation, we had 4 different SUs, some going to different places, some of the districts, and then new districts being formed. And so that one was a lot more complicated. And I would say the 3 years, we got it done, and I can tell you that it took probably 5 years of being into the new district to really feel like we could focus on math and literacy and the important things.
Okay, thank you.
It's just the reality.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm having a little giggle to the very clean Mount Mansfield district that had a lawsuit and 3 different votes and all of the other things. So very clean is it means that they're not easy even when they're easy, right? Like they're.
Edie, I'm so sorry. I had forgotten about the one group of folks. Yeah, that you're absolutely right. I had forgotten about Huntington. Yeah. But in general, the beginning of that and the process was a lot cleaner, except for the one outlier.
Yes.
But now that you said that, I think it probably was. Anyway, we don't need to get into that. Okay,
Yes,
so on page 20 of this document, the evaluation checklist, and you'll see on the top is it asks a question. Does this plan lead to or facilitate? Yes, no, unclear. How does it do it? And then possible risks. So then we go to, and these are some of the attributes of the act: better, more opportunities for students, unclear. And then it goes through each of them: a fair chance for every child, cohesion to the pre-K-12 experiences. And again, this left-hand column was taken directly from the work that Jay and Beth did. So if that changes, we'd obviously have to change this template. Yeah, it just walks through those and goes through each one. And again, we looked at a single state district. And then on page 23, you see we take specifically the impact of effectiveness. We'll go through the same questions. And on the data sources, that this is the 4th column, it's really important to have a lot of the data around facilities, the school quality index, PCBs, age, special education, distributions, transportation, ridership, contracts, vehicle distances, sizes, fleet operation. And I can tell you, people talk a lot when they talk about consolidation. They talk about bus rides, and one thing we don't think about is rethinking how we do transportation and small vans, electric vehicles going shorter distances versus large buses. And in some districts, you have a bus and the ridership is maybe 10 kids because parents choose to transport their own kids, but you can't not take the bus on the route because if they all rode, the bus would be full. So there's a lot of issues around transportation that people mention it a lot, and I don't believe it's been flushed out. Personal opinion. And again, on page 25, you see the impact on quality and what greater quality would look like. And again, the data sources which we would need in order to evaluate this. Page 27, impact on fair and equitable opportunity. And this one really talks about BOCES, which we launched into. And on page 29, the responsiveness of the system, democratic and inclusive governance, we tried to figure out how one would evaluate that with data. You know, and measuring public satisfaction, participation in this particular model, in the election of the state board, but the board would be appointed. So in a single state board, it would be really hard to evaluate democratic and inclusive governance unless there was some fixture at the building level where you included the local vote in decision making. Evidence of overall feasibility and successful implementation. And the successful implementation, oftentimes we make a rule, but the work plan has not been created. And to figure out how a work plan, i.e. a 3-year plan to get the work done. And then on page 31, the SWOT, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Actually, I want to back up a second. One of the assumptions here is one school district in the state of Vermont. And one of the things we realized is there's 2 interstate districts, Rivendell and Dresden. And we can't have one state district because those are governed by federal law because they're between 2 states. So automatically the plan for one district is actually 3 districts. So there's sometimes underlying questions that will come out on making maps that we will make assumptions, and these things will pop up because there's so many unique characteristics in Vermont. And you could read these strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And then at the end, we did, which is the opportunity cost. What will educators, leaders, and others give up focus on governance change? And this gets to your question earlier about who's the we. And so the things, and this is just a short brainstorm of the things that we want to be focusing on in schools and districts, which we wouldn't be able to be doing because we would be focusing on whatever governance change work, and it would be work. So that's our attempt. On page 34, you see on the left-hand column, which is the last page, the back, you see the tick list from the statute or the law that was written, and then yes, no, not available, and then explanation to figure out whether we have met the categories that have been put forth to us in building these maps. So that's a very brief summary of a 34 page document, of which Rebecca put together most of this. And a bunch of this was drawn from the merger document, the governance document from the AOE guiding previous mergers. So the thought is, if we came up with a map, we would try to put it through a test such as this. Thoughts, comments, and I'm going to ask that comments are on this as a process, not the details of this. So what do people think about the pages, the questions, the checklists, not page 23, section 1.5?
Mine was not on the process.
Okay. Put that in the parking lot.
Okay.
This would have made it so much easier to create sample maps. That's a start. And I really appreciate the work. I was going to ask how many people were on your staff to put this together. No, this is great.
Thoughts about whether this would be useful in when a map is drawn.
Unique if it helps. You can see it in clean version. It's handed out in the packet at your table. If you want to see what it looks like without any information in it. The purpose of trying to lay out the single Hawaii was to see what kinds of issues get surfaced. But this is the template that you would be complete. I don't know what this is yet.
I'll just say thank you. This seems like a Herculean effort and task, and I can't imagine how much time it took, but thank you. It's incredible. And to answer from my perspective, to answer your question, is this useful or would this be useful? Yes, I think it would, and should be useful for us. It puts everything into something that seems, maybe manageable isn't the right word, but something that we could actually, sink our teeth into, and it gives us some, I don't know, a pathway forward. So thank you again.
two other observations. Thank you. And two other observations. We have to write this up as a report. And so having a template and using a uniform way of documenting the work we do means we're writing the report as we go. And it makes that final process easier because there's consistency across the plans that are proposed. So that was sort of a driving logic, hoping to make it easier to get to the report.
I do have a process question. And first, thank you. This is wonderful. And I want one of those books too, please.
You can get them, you can order them.
I think we all,
Yes, the BPA or the BSA.
okay. So having this, the legislatively mandated considerations at the end, is that the right place to have it?
I think that's one you should ask. I think what we found is almost all of those came up in the context of the other. So I could see that you might go down at the very end and say, yep, did that, and then tear the sheet off because it's already addressed. I think it's just that because the law says that you have to consider it, we wanted to double check that in the context of the larger planning document, you have actually addressed everything.
That's kind of how I say, you're always keeping it in mind as you do everything else, but it's that final checklist. To say, oh, now we're gonna go back to this section, or
It would make sense for me in a report for that to be at the beginning. And then all the details later.
Okay,
Or, I mean,
that's what I was thinking. But I don't want to get into details. But I think I would appreciate it being earlier in the process. And at the end.
Yeah, we got
Sandwich.
Where in this, Jen?
Senator Beck.
Where in this, one of the things from, Act 73 is that, creating a proposed districts task force shall consider current school districts and town boundaries and other historic and current community connections. Is that tested anywhere in here, or?
I think that may have been in, and now I realize it may have been having been done, we moved it to the end. So that should be, because we told, this was cut and paste directly from the law and
Yeah.
some of the requirements. So I think that's very good.
Put that in.
Off the pitchfork test?
We like the ones for that.
Go ahead.
So I have a question. I'll try to make it process, but you've thought about this more than the rest of us. So would the whole process of coming up with this have enlightened you as to whether or not moving to one single district would save, let's say, the state, because it would be the state, money in terms of certainly have differently elected or appointed school board members and fewer of them. But what about the administrators? What about the superintendents and central office staff? You apply this to it. Does it give you an idea about whether or not money can be saved by moving to a single district?
Well, first of all, I think we didn't get the data until,
Yeah.
until now. So same as you, where we were shooting in the dark, right? So you can throw spaghetti at the wall all you want, but unless you're doing actual staffing, there's no way to know. I think it isn't, I think the challenge I'm having with this entire process is you could redistrict and nothing could change, or it could change depending on the kind of administration you have. So, that's an administrative choice. And so until we know what people are doing, we do know from looking at prior mergers that in some areas it freed capacity, but that people turn that capacity around, put it into other things. I think the caution that Jen put out around staffing and contracts, it's not just that Essex pays more, it's also that their teachers have more experience than, surprise, surprise, the low compensation districts. So you could see quite significant increases right out of the gate in spending, and it's not clear it's going to lead to lower costs someplace else because you haven't changed the footprint. So one of the provocations was that unless there's construction aid, you're really not talking about changing the status quo. And I think there's always, we should just put on the table, and I think we should have a section. I think it was in your report. There is tension between local and state level decision making. Part of the dysfunction is because we're not making state level budget decisions, but they're being administered locally. A friend of mine calls this the spandex school of management. It fits everyone, but it doesn't look pretty in some places. We're gonna have to have that conversation, because I think that is a reality that as we start to think this through, there's some parts where this would be places where this would be a really awful plan. And there's some places that are like, yeah, why didn't we do this yesterday? And so those are the kinds of issues we're gonna have to clear out.
So you mentioned this last time, or someone did, about increased revenues, but spending happened in other places.
Mhm.
Do we know where that spending happened? Post-merger.
That's one of the reasons we've been looking at cost drivers. And if you look, I would encourage us all, now that the agencies put it up, to go take a look at where staffing has increased. We've actually reduced the number of teachers in the state, but we're spending more money on principals, assistant principals. This speaks to your point about management, and I think you said it in our power loitering out in the hallway. But I think the more legislative demands, we have now risk management, behavioral threat assessment stuff. People hire people to deal with that. We have a huge mental health crisis. We're seeing a huge growth in expenditures on support services. So the increases in those other categories have been made easier in some places because of the new system, but they're swamping the effect of the reductions in the teaching groups. So this is we're squeezing the balloon here. But you were part of that process too, Chris.
Yeah, no, I mean, the support staff is blown up because of the mental health crisis. That is accurate.
And probably also because it's special ed. When we look at
Yes.
the way, and that's why we put those things in, because it's clear that we have some challenges around how you and support these students.
And some of it is not just the dollar amount, it's the time, because one of the examples that happened for the end of my teaching career would be implementing proficiency-based grading. Instead of the state saying, here it is, everyone had local control to figure out it for themselves. But what that meant was a lot of hours of teachers, superintendents, and principals in rooms creating a grading system for our school district, for our SU. And that was happening over the entire state. So that was time on that. So I said, what are you doing when you're doing this, what aren't you doing? What are you giving up to do that? The dollars didn't change. We weren't paid any differently to do it, but I wasn't in my classroom. I wasn't making lesson plans. I wasn't calling parents. I was making rubrics.
These are all really good points. We're at lunch, so I'll certainly entertain last comments, but I do think, Dave brings up a really interesting point, which is when people think about larger districts, they're always like, well, you'd be able to cut staff, jobs, and it's like, yes, and it takes a certain amount of adults to run an education system. It takes a certain amount of adults to make sure that state statute is being adhered to and followed through on. So those numbers don't necessarily lower when you consolidate. I think it's an important thing for us to keep in mind, Chris.
But I would also
And then
piggyback on like administration on the facility side. The federal laws regarding PCBs, whether it's lead in the water or whatever, back in 20 years ago, I used to be able to handle it all myself. Now I had to hire someone. So the facilities is one. Food services, another. I could go on and on. What's that, Kim?
Transportation, everybody's
Well,
third.
that's the thing with all the. So Rebecca got me started with support staff, but it's bigger than that. Because I think it's all of that stuff that I've noticed in 25 years is because of a federal law, I needed someone. And then that looks at like administration, which bumps it up.
and state law, I mean, like PCB levels.
100%.
Federal level, so thank you, yes.
Yeah, I just want to circle back to your question, Dave, which is we created this template to try to evaluate on that. And how do we know, does this template actually have the feature to tell us, is it going to save money? So, yeah, one district. Right now, we have 53 superintendents, right?
Yeah, 63.
Six, right, so, okay. Hawaii, one district. Will the template then say, okay, when we make this one district, we won't have superintendents, or will they become assistant regional folks and stay in the budget? So I don't know if the template does that, and I'm not suggesting, of course, this model, but
Yeah.
I need to go back and rethink on the part that asks about the money, whether or not this template is effective. And I think that's a good place to end, because we all should look at this.
Yes,
And think,
think 29.
you know, it's a long document, and look at, is this actually going to be effective in meeting our goals, which are pretty specific, to make a couple maps.
But that section was designed to force you to think about, does this actually say,
Once we
or have a measurement?
Wonderful. All right, thank you. Let's be back, ready to start at 1 o'clock, ready to start at 1, so be back before 1, if possible, please. Thank you. That's my mom voice.
I forgot, I usually have in my car a bunch of gummy bears, I forgot to bring them in.
That would be fun.
There's only one kind. There's only one kind of. The one you get in the special shop. There's.
Is everyone back? Which seltzer was yours?
Not mine.
Oh, okay, okay,
They're both yours.
okay.
Different one.
Guys, I know, Senator Harrison's not back, but I think we should get started.
Oh, this is it.
All right, welcome back, folks. Is Orca good? Teams, are we good? Yeah, excellent. Wonderful. We are back. This is the School District Redistricting Task Force. It's September 10th, Wednesday. We're back from lunch and we are beginning our afternoon program, so to speak. We're going to start. Well, first of all, does anyone have any comments post-lunch they want to share with the task force and the audience? Kim Gleason has her hand up. I recognize Kim.
I had checked in with Senator Beck after with regard to the comment and the checklist at the end of the rubric.
Mm-hmm.
And when I took a look back at the law, the reference to at least one
Wait, can you
boundary.
just remind us what it was that was
Oh, yes.
said?
There was a final checklist at the end of the rubric or the models that we were using that ticks through all of the areas that must be considered. And this is all of the areas that must be considered in law. But what I think we could remedy the concern of Senator Beck by doing would be to put the intent, or I don't know if it's intent language or charge,
Sorry, and
powers and duties.
Kim, I just want folks to know that what's on the screen is not germane to what you're talking about right now. No, just FYI, everybody, these are two different things. Remind us what it was that Senator Beck said, because I asked.
Senator Beck said that he didn't see in the list the consideration for use of supervisory unions and continuing tuitioning. And that's not,
No.
oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said
I said that I do not see
historic.
past versus historical consideration. Yeah. That was my question.
And I think the
That's not one of the items in the law. It's not. So you guys thought, I think.
My question.
Hold on, let's back up.
My question.
Hang on, Senator Beck, hang on one second.
Can
We're
I
gonna
read
pause the discussion and let Senator Beck
Sure,
rephrase his
of
question.
course, great.
Well, restating whatever, we just want to hear what it is you asked.
I asked whether in all of the criteria that were used in this test, if there had been a historical test. That was my question.
So A says current school district town boundaries and other historic and current community connections, including access to regional services for students such as designated agencies, which is exactly what it says in the law. And what I was suggesting to you as we headed out to lunch was that what you had raised in recognizing the type of, I thought I understood you to be saying the historical tuitioning patterns and SUs. Okay, well then I think it's resolved, right? Because A, as it says in the law, does exactly what I think you're asking then. What I was suggesting as a remedy was to just say ahead of this table that we are constructing no more than 3 maps, and that one of those maps must consider and take the language directly from the law. But if that's not necessary, Senator Beck, and you feel that A meets what you were concerned about, then I don't think we need the preamble.
It was just a question as to whether there was a historical test there. That was the question.
Does that do it though, A?
So I understood that you were asking us whether the historic language, the reference, not
Historical.
historic, yeah, that is, it says in A, because it's cut and paste from the law, current school districts and town boundaries and other historic and current community connections. So yes, and it would be here, we would have to
Yeah.
address it.
Okay.
And the explanation is, in this particular thing, is since we didn't change anything,
Yeah.
it's still addressed, because everyone's,
Okay. Thank you.
yeah. So I think it's a good question. That's exactly the feedback and the question we need. We need people to challenge that.
Thank you, Senator Beck. And I would just, I guess I would offer up, because that seems like it was a bit of a communication, not breakdown, but like, communication snafu. I would just, ask that we all state whatever it is we're stating as clearly as humanly possible, but then also those of us who are listening, that if we have a question, we ask it, maybe we rephrase the statement, or we go and meet with that person one-on-one and make sure that we understand the intent of what's being said. Because obviously, this is hard work, it's an emotional work, and it's complicated, just to keep reiterating that. So thank you both for bringing that up and working that up. Appreciate it. Yes.
Can I just reiterate? I think it's actually really helpful, because one of the things that's interesting is when people come from different parts of the state, we're all making assumptions, and our assumption may be completely different than Beth's, but we're using the same words. So I think it is, if you could please, before the meeting, look at this template with that perspective in mind, because we're trying to find a way to talk about this where we are forced to surface and actually explain what we mean, so that people understand. So I really appreciate you saying that again, Senator. I feel like it's really good.
I really appreciate that you're highlighting it, because I honestly wasn't sure what historical meant there either. So I really appreciate that we were able to flesh that out. Beth, did you have your hand up? No?
No, I just,
Edie does.
no, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Rep Grinning, go ahead.
Well, I'm changing the subject, so if you want to stick on this subject, I will hold my question.
Yeah, no, go ahead. We have a little bit of time. Well, we don't really have time, but go ahead.
So earlier in the meeting, we had a representative from the Agency of Education talking about the fact that they weren't, or they aren't aware. I don't know if they're still in the room. I can't see. Weren't
Torrin is
aware.
here.
Torrin is there. Great. So that Torrin isn't aware of data issues with the agency, and that felt inaccurate to me. I thought that one of the biggest takeaways from the Listen and Learn tour was that there were data inaccuracies, and every single school district superintendent, school board was pushing back on those inaccuracies. This is a historical thing. It's because the systems within the agency don't talk to each other in part, and data has to be hand ported over. This has nothing to do, this is not it's not an issue with any individuals there. And I think that when we say, or when anyone from the agency says that they don't know about it, it sets up a system of mistrust. And I feel that that's not a good place for us to be when we're looking at making giant changes with education. And so I just know that that's something that I was thinking about still over lunch. Not privy to having conversations with folks that were much more interesting than me being frustrated with that. And so I really thought that I wanted to share that with everyone.
Thank you, Rep Granning. Torrin, if you want to speak, you do need to come to the table. Sure. Great. I appreciate that.
Yeah, just want to clarify that from my comments earlier, I was not aware of any specific discrepancies of data that has been provided to the task force. Not saying that I'm completely unaware of just any overall data issues at the agency. Just wanted to clarify that point. And I have had some informal conversations today to learn a little more about that from the school perspective. So that's been very helpful for me.
Thank you,
Great.
Torrin.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And thanks to everyone who's leaning in on these miscommunications and difficulty in, just generally in communicating. I think it's great that we're all leaning in, so much appreciated. So at 1 o'clock on our agenda, we have Senator Harrison and we have Jay Adams presenting and discussing the work that they did around a county level plan, what it might look like, what strengths and weaknesses it might have, and so on and so forth. So I yield the mic to you both.
John Adams will be helping with the IT so that folks can see the maps up there. And fortunately, the county boundary map was already programmed. So that is one that we can see relatively easily. And I just want to talk a little bit about the county boundary aspect. I think that would be a great place to start. Forget. Yeah, that's the county boundaries. Obviously that represents historic boundaries. I think we all probably knew what county we were in before you saw the map. And I think most of our residents know what counties they're in. The geography of the state has impacted the county boundaries. You notice that the spine of the mountains is the boundary between the east and the west. And what we found in our area is most of our movement is north and south. And I think that's the same on either side, obviously because of the mountains. And so I think county boundaries are definitely worth our purview or our time to investigate more completely. So that's all I was going to say on county boundaries right now. I do see other efficiencies, like transportation, for example, is often public transportation often is per county, rough county boundaries. And we have a lot of other things that we do in the state that have boundaries that are similar to county boundaries, but not quite there. And so this could be a way to start normalizing many other things. Okay, so, and then I have a different topic, which is the other map that was shown, but do you want to talk about county boundaries first?
Oh, absolutely, sure.
Okay.
I would just preface it by saying this is super preliminary, not ready for prime time really, but if we could pull up the table, the spreadsheet that was up earlier.
While we're pulling that up, can I ask a quick question, which was someone brought it up earlier that I think somewhere in the statute it mentions that we should try to adhere to existing boundaries, district boundaries. Did you take that into consideration?
Definitely.
Okay, great.
Counties are very much existing boundaries.
Of school districts?
Oh,
Existing school.
no, so there would need to be some tweaking.
Yeah, okay.
At many of the county boundaries. Some of them are contiguous with the county boundaries, but some aren't.
So in wrestling with county, the county map, it was really interesting to me just to see where we have SUs that cross multiple county borders. It's really interesting to see how things break down. It would be a big change. And I agree with Senator Harrison that it is a little promising, whether you're looking at counties as possibly a basis for a BOCES model or something like that. But looking through the each of the pages that come up when you use the tool, you see them one district at a time. So I just built this really rudimentary spreadsheet just to try to put it all on one page. And this just gives you the ADM, the grand list figures, numbers of schools, high schools, middle schools, K-8s, and then independent schools. And I just kind of try to break out the independent schools that actually had capacity for students in the high school years. I found it interesting that once you take out the outliers, the two very low ADM districts and the one very high, we had this 4,000 number out there as sort of a guideline, but we're not too far off. And our average ends up right now being 5,940 students. But there's a lot of disparity around grand list per student. And so I don't know how good of a proxy that is for equity. As we wrestled with this, I was struck by how hard it is to try to pick out the towns to try to balance those things. But I actually put, there's a tab, if we go to the tab that says by county GL per student high-low, there we go. So here I listed them, filtered it according to the grand list per student. You can see the big range and going from Franklin with 0.7 or $700,000 per student to Grand Isle at 2.4.
Is that homestead or all change?
It's, those figures are, I believe, all, if I'm not mistaken, for the grand per student. Are those
The per student here, I believe they're adjusted using the projections based on homestead exemption for the X from X73.
Does that answer your question, Senator Brock? I just used what was in the system.
Yeah, so that's the homestead grand list being modified for exemption. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Like I said, this is really rudimentary, and what came out, what I learned from this exercise is like all the additional questions, all the additional data, many of which were captured in Jen and Rebecca's work. Which that's why I said earlier, if I had that to start with, I would have probably looked at this a lot differently. But interestingly, as I was going through this, I kept trying to find ways to balance that were not county by county, and if we have the map, the other map that I sent that just shows 2 districts, there should be a PDF file. I have the fun picture. And while we're just throwing maps against the wall, I tried to find one that balanced ADM and grand list per student, and I came up with a 2-district solution that had our 83,000 students split 41,402 and 41,764 by creating a horizontal line from Barnet to Shelburne. Done. We got a balance. And the grand list per student is 1.35 and 1.23, which are a lot closer than the range we showed by county. That's purely for illustrative purposes. Using this tool, it's kind of interesting to be able to dig in and make these comparisons. What are the better metrics to apply to our maps as we hypothesize? So we had essentially a northern Vermont and a southern Vermont, or actually it's more than southern, but I was amazed how that balanced out. It was really difficult with our wealthier towns in the north and our bigger towns with much higher grand list per student. It was so difficult to try to find any way to balance those short. This is the only solution I came up with. There probably are other ways to do it.
Jay, could I ask a question for folks who might be listening in? What is can you just big picture talk about why it's important to sort of have that balance? I'm not sure everyone understands.
Well, just in terms of thinking about equity of resources, and I'm not saying that grand list for student is the measure of equity that is of most interest, but it's what's available on the tool. And so we just started experimenting using that. I'm really eager to go back to the county model with our test now and see what else we can dig up. I threw some questions out there, again, not having seen Jen and Rebecca's work yet, as we thought about a countywide model. Just thinking, like, in what ways does the county district model make progress toward our goals? In what ways does the county model make our situation worse? Could county districts function as SUs? What geographic limitations are there to a county model? And Senator Harrison's description of how the counties are laid out relative to our geography might be an advantage. And the other question that, again, we wrestled with a lot was, how would you deal with the very small or very large outlier counties? If you had a county district with over 20,000 students, would it make sense to split into a East County, West County, or some other configuration?
2 CTEs.
Right, yeah, there you go. Well, so we'll look forward to your presentation on the 29th. And then, I'm not familiar enough with what other countywide governance support could potentially be available. Are other partner agencies that are organized on a county basis, but there could be ways to leverage other governance resources, I guess. And those are some of the questions that came up with thinking that, again, not having the test, I think this gives us a much fuller picture that we could round out. Thanks.
Yeah.
Jerry, what's the, using brand list for Indiana? What problem are you trying to solve, or what problem are you trying to avoid by balancing that out?
Well, just not having all the, I didn't do any of the analysis about how the proposed funding formula would impact that. It's what's been put out there on this tool for us to explore with, and that's essentially all I had to work with.
So, I mean, in a statewide funding formula where it's a statewide grant list, I'm not sure, really, if that metric really matters in the end.
It very well may not.
Yeah.
And that's what I had to work with. And so just trying to, I said really just for illustrative purposes, that map we just thought it was fun. Just because we split the ADMs in half.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting.
We had to make our line that far north to split it, which was wild.
It's also the Route 2 and snow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah, but once we get, so if we have more population data, and again, I've talked about having like the individual locations of every school age child in the state and being able to plot those. When you have that level of data, you can get a much different picture, one that obviously changes year to year, but you can also look at trends over time. We were just stricken by, I say we, my son and I were working on this. He's a GIS professional and an engineer that works for a telecom company here in the state. And he had all these questions and was requesting data that I just didn't have. And he tried to find source data in the interactive tool we had, and he wasn't able to pull it down. But if we get into some of the population sparsity, the attendance information in greater detail, it's possible to make some very detailed maps where you could really just put the county boundaries on there and see how those things break down. So, but when I volunteered, I was volunteering to play with it and come back with just some general impressions. So I'm sorry I don't have a more detailed plan.
Great.
Did you look at Route 4?
We did. We looked at. I didn't want to put it out there because it's so draft, but we actually looked at school buildings versus actual E911 residential addresses, and I have another map that actually shows, it's color coded and shows a line from every address to a school within 30 minutes of every E911 address. And you want to filter that down by high school, elementary, middle, or whatever it is. But that's something I want to elaborate on with some better data. But he has a map that's really pretty. It looks like fireworks all over the place, but it shows a line going from each residence to each school. And if he can, all he needs is the source data, like in an Excel format, and I can have that for a line to every high school, to every elementary school.
And is it just 911 data to the closest school, or is it?
We set the parameter. He did one for an hour distance, and he did another one for a half hour so far. We could do any increment of time, and
is that as the crow flies or on the road?
On the road.
Yeah.
And in fact, he even can filter, because they do telecom work, he can filter it by roads that are not open in the wintertime. You can do it by class 4, like excluding class 4s. Actual road distance is what it is. And that technology's there.
If you were to take this back page of what we did with the maps that you made, what are your thoughts on how to make an intersection with the data with some of the items on this checklist?
As long as there was data, usable data that could be imported into the system on each of those, we can make whatever layers you want.
So,
and I'm sure our folks probably can too. We were really just wanting to he has a lot of questions. He has little kids in one of our districts, and he was asking me questions I couldn't answer. They're asking me for data that I didn't have, and I think I think now having the test, going through there and seeing what else is there that I can find out that I can provide to do some more experimenting.
Thank you, Jay. That's really great. Wendy, we do have like an action step actually next on our agenda. Use the test evaluation criteria to develop and discuss the proposed county level plan. But I think Wendy, you wanted to say something before we got to that?
It's not, well, I have learned a lot about my area in particular and other areas. So I've been using this map, which is an older map, and challenging. But just the variation in the SUs. And actually now if you can put on the other, John Adams put on a couple other layers to the county, to the map. That we have that you all can access. And so we have a layer for SUs, and then we have a layer for the underlying districts, because they just vary so much. And I know probably all of you know all of this, but I don't think everyone knows all about this. So what these are tuitioning districts. And you see the yellow hybrid, that means that they that they tuition only certain grades. And the blues are where they tuition all of the grades, as you can see. And gotta try to figure out how to do this. There are.
Can you scroll down?
Well, that was the information that we had on our website. So that's what I gave John, and that's what he used. So I would love to update it. So again, the blues are completely tuitioning and the yellows are hybrid. I had, before I was part of this group, I had assumed that tuitioning, when you just had a few grades, was just high school, but it's not. It turns out there's some interesting, I don't want to start pointing out because it's just going to be hard, but there's 3 districts that are part of an SU in my district. Oh, okay, actually, John, so this is a different one. This is Vernon, and Vernon has tuitioning for high school, probably know. And a lot of the kids used to go to a private high school in Massachusetts. Now they're going to a public high school in Massachusetts. But Vernon is the only district, or the single district, that causes that SU to be an SU. If Vernon was part of the district, which is the towns to the left, so the white ones and the 3 up, those towns are all one district within an SU. So that, yeah, there you go. So the brown towns are the remaining districts in Wyndham Southeast. It's really hard to show this on a 2-dimensional map. We actually need 3 dimensions, which we can't do. But I really appreciate John Adams working on this. So then going just above where you see Westminster and Athens and Grafton, they tuition just for middle school, for 7th and 8th, which is a very different arrangement. I've been focusing a lot on high schools not having enough kids, but that's not an issue with those 3. So those 3 are the kind of outliers in Wyndham Northeast. So I want to end there just because it just gets.
Well, so you were tasked with working on a county map. Did you have some learning in this exercise that is somehow transferable to a county or relates to a county map, or? I'm just wondering what your,
Well, there's multiple takeaways. So one is that there have been, I believe, when this map or when this data was created, there were 2 schools that are no longer operating. So things do change, and they change organically. And I think it's sometimes a great consternation to a community, whether or not they're doing themselves or having it done by others. So there are people do understand, more people understand the fragility in our system, and I think that's going to be helpful when we speak to them about future changes. And I think it will hopefully help us be, again, very specific. This is learning these things is one of the reasons I want to just be super, super clear on assumptions, which is going to make it all more complicated. But not assume things from other districts, because what I had thought were more typical of the SUs was the tuitioning districts, where it's all tuitioned, which is a very different situation.
okay.
So
Thank you for sharing your learning with us. Appreciate it. So question for the task force is how would you like to proceed? Because if we are going to try to take that county level map and use the test evaluation criteria to, discuss it, develop it, do we want to do, I'm not a huge fan of like group, wordsmithing and editing, and because it can get tricky. Do we want to, is this a moment for us to break up into groups and try to do some of that in that way, or would you like to work on it as a group?
It's pretty small.
Yeah, we could do, Jen?
One thing I think might be really helpful is what I was saying to Jay before, on page 11 of our blank template, is to go through each of these and figure out what sort of data and maps would we need to be able to get the information specifically for the county. I guess that's what we just said. I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I was proposing. We've got about 15 minutes till our next agenda item. Yes.
Actually, Scott, your question made me think of something, and you were asking, I forget how you asked it, but you asked something about why we're interested in grand list per student.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a really interesting question, because what we're trying to get at is what is the capacity of these districts to support their communities, and is it roughly equitable? I think is that the embedded question?
Well, no, the embedded question is that in a funding system where there is no local grand list, doesn't matter what the local grand list gradient is.
So, and which I think is a really interesting question. And I think there's a corollary, which is why we care about district size. So I wonder if what we need to be thinking about is what are the questions that we need to be asking that we maybe not asked, are not, I cannot speak today. We are not asking yet, because I think that there's some embedded assumptions that we're going to have to surface. So I guess I'm just saying, as we break into small groups, could we be asking what it is that we don't know? And I'm just going to put in a plug again. We could save the agency a lot of time if the data came in spreadsheets with rows and columns that allowed us to merge data sets. Otherwise, we're going to have to keep coming back and back and back. So,
Yeah. Hopefully that was received loud and clear, but appreciated. So I can suggest that we break into 2 groups. Yeah, go ahead.
If we did 3 groups, we wouldn't have public meeting and we'd have to say anything. Like, do we have I'm just worried about people offline. I mean, I don't want us to be having a quorum in one group in a way that's not fair and it's not consistent. But if we did little groups, then the little groups could report out and everybody would have access to the same information.
That's a good point. Yeah, that is a good point. Sure, we could do smaller groups. Yes, Dave has his hand up.
I was just wondering why we couldn't do it among the 11 of us. Is it too
We can, it could be
complex
clunky,
text?
but we can try it. Sure.
That way we don't have any issue and people can see, out there can see what's going on there.
Okay. Can I elect, Jen, can you lead the discussion, or Rebecca, since you were so instrumental in putting the template together, I think it makes sense for you to drive the discussion. Or get it started anyway.
Okay, page 11, final check that the legislatively mandated considerations have been weighed and addressed. This is of the blank template. Current school district and town boundaries and other historic and current community connections, including access to regional services for students such as designated agencies. Does the county map do this with the data we have? What other data do we need?
Sure, go ahead, Wendy. Senator Harrison.
I would say mostly yes, and, because it's certainly historic connections. Regional services, designated agencies are, somewhat, according to, county boundaries. Not exactly.
Yeah, and I think of an example, I've got a Hazy Union, for example, is a school that has, literally, it's located in Calhoun County. It has kids coming to it from 4 counties, Washington, Memorial, and Orleans. And they struggle mightily with the county model because, they're looking towards, they're on the edge, looking back into the county, and all their people are coming from the other directions. Yeah.
I'd say the same thing is true in Kingdom East, where I'm from. It straddles towns into Essex County, not just Caledonia.
So regarding the large counties with small populations, I should have included this. What I would suggest that if we are going to look at that model more, that we would combine some of those counties. The distances are very large.
Yeah.
But in order to have the basic amount of kids for a county.
In the context of this question, which says such as designated agencies, would it make sense to get a map of the social services, the human services, the Department of Motor Vehicles, I don't know what agencies,
Yeah.
but mostly the social service ones, and overlay that, and then also the maps of the districts that border 2 counties or 3 counties that have multiple ones, because this also says current community connections, current school district and town boundaries. So if we did the county map, Hazen would be up a creek, right? Because they'd be going in 4 different directions because they wouldn't.
Yeah, right, and then their tech centers over in Memorial County.
Right.
Yeah, that too.
So that would be an historical arrangement, and that would be needed to overlay somehow on.
Yeah, it doesn't fit a neat county line, I think.
Yeah, and I would suggest CVSU, where I came from, saying from Pay Mountain has 2 high schools in 2 different counties.
Yeah.
And essentially probably would go to 2 different tech centers, so that it throws the historical side up. And, I forgot the Harvard, but yeah, or he's, so there's many more that I'm sure I'm not thinking of.
Yeah.
Kim?
Get to that by the data that informs current tuitioning patterns, like for each school district, where are those kids currently going? And I don't know that that's an overlay map, but it is a data point that I know that I think was on our original list. And I don't know how we consider, reflecting current patterns without knowing current patterns.
In the context of tuitioning, when I was at Kingdom East, we had kids going to 15 different schools.
Exactly.
And a whole hunk of them went to Linden or St. Jay, but there were also, so I don't know.
But we aren't necessarily in designing a system that serves students pre-K-12 going to, I think it would be helpful for even me and my own county to know what are the patterns of tuitioning currently. And it may be that it looks like a shotgun and we see no patterns, or it might be that there are already 3 high schools that are the predominant receivers. And I think that is information to help inform where alignments might happen if you're pulling communities together. But I think that's a really important data point, and I haven't seen it yet.
And would you want that in the context of a map?
If it can happen on a map, great. I don't know if it can happen on a map, but if it would even be helpful to see it on a spreadsheet.
Okay, I will circle up with
If it could be an
ADS on that.
overlay, cool.
Yeah, that'd be great. Okay.
Okay, so a good,
Just one other thing, I think, that's a really good example. Also, the advantage of the county, one of the challenges Hazen has is they have to deal with 4 different DAs. So
Yeah.
4 kids who are sitting next to each other in the same classroom with the same needs are gonna get 4 different baskets of service
County sheriffs, the whole-
because of, well, or just 4 different social service packages because of
Yeah.
town of origin. So just to be clear, the complexity isn't all on the school side,
Right.
it's also coming out of HS.
That was super helpful. Thank you.
I have a question on this one. We're
Edie?
talking, we're talking about what to do when there is too small of a county. What is too big? And how does that look like, and how do we decide that? So if we're looking at 4,000 to 8,000, and one of the counties was over 20,000, I believe. How do we deal with that?
Good question. Thank you.
There it is.
Yeah.
And I guess, yeah, well, I would say we consider breaking it up, but if that doesn't make sense for other reasons. I mean, that's why we have multiple criteria, and in many of these situations, things are gonna meet one,
Right.
some criteria, not others, so that would be a discussion, and I would.
As practical.
Yeah. Yes.
Just to be practical, also, those of us who sat in one of the finance committees or Ways and Means, some of this was actually modeled.
It was.
Like
I was thinking the
council,
same
and we
thing.
should, to the extent
Yeah.
that we can pull some previous modeling and not reinvent the wheel, that would save time.
Good.
If you would like, I just think there's a lot of back and pull that.
Jay?
In the original, one district model that you folks piloted in this test, it's interesting, in Pennsylvania, their BOCES are called intermediate units, and they're a function of the Pennsylvania Department of Education. There are 29 of them in a state with 500 school districts. And ours in Erie was part of the tri-county, it was a tri-county intermediate unit. So if you did have, if our districts were essentially counties, you could have systems of support that would be multi-county easily and still use the county as the building block, but have multiple counties represented in that BOCES model.
Thanks for sharing that. I think we can continue with the discussion, because it's really at 1:45, it's sort of a continuation of the discussion, so we can keep going. Yeah.
so I wanted to ask you, Jay, on B and C, are these both able to be done through the mapping tool?
I'm sure put geography on there for sure.
And are there ways to see, if you're in Waitsfield, you don't want to go to Lincoln, although it might be close, because you got to go to the Appalachian Gap, like ways to.
Right. Or if you're in Cambridge and stuff.
Right.
Yeah, I think we could certainly do that, and our own knowledge of Vermont's geography will be instructive too, I'm sure.
And John Adams has put some of that information.
So for B and C, can people think of any other pieces of data that we would need to evaluate this?
Ask question C.
So are we looking at overall population distribution or student population distribution? Knowing where the kids are, not just where people are.
I second that, because we need to talk about sparsity.
Because there could be a whole lot of people, but none of them are going to school.
But we could, I mean, I think it's an easy matter to do both.
Yeah, we need the data to do mapping of students, because some counties are much older than other
Yeah.
counties, and so they may have the same population but different student populations. So we just need to know what we're actually doing. Yes.
Yes, Jay?
And I think too, having the total population sparsity is useful too when you think about staffing for us. I know for a lot of districts, it's hard to find teachers and other staff.
I see our ADS folks raising their hand. I don't think you'll be heard unless you come to the table. At least you won't be heard by the outside universe. So I welcome you to the table. John, come on up. I was gonna say, we might want to have you up here because this is all very relevant to your work.
Yeah, I guess I was just curious if you wanted me to maybe point out where some of these things are
Yes,
as you go
please.
through them.
I think so.
Screen share as well.
Great.
All right, I am not screen sharing. So for population distribution, you do currently have two options. One is to look at the ADM per town. By public school students. And then you also have this very high resolution population distribution there, which is not limited to students, but so those are the two things that are currently on your map. And if there's anything else you're looking for, let me know.
Just a quick question. When we're
Yeah.
looking at the public school students and the independent school students, I'm assuming that, I guess I shouldn't assume. I'm going to ask a question. On the independent school students, are they publicly paid for, or is it all students that go to those independent schools? Sorry.
Do you know the answer to that, John?
I'm not sure I understood the question, but I'll tell you what I put up here. And that was essentially what the Agency of Education gave me as the ADM student population by town of residence.
The independent school list is not the list that is posted on, it's not the same as the list posted on the agency website of schools that will still be eligible for tuition. So there's a lot more independent schools on this map.
Correct.
Then it seems like it would be constructive to have those two sources aligned.
Yes, Rep.
Well-
Quimby.
Because they might, if it's just for attendance purposes. So we have students who are going to independent schools that aren't approved independent schools, but we still track them because we need to know that they're attending somewhere. Those are not publicly funded students.
Correct, but is that germane to our redistricting process?
They might,
Because our
know.
redistricting is addressed to the kids in the public system who include publicly funded approved independent schools.
but they could go to a public school next year. Their parents decided not to pay tuition for them, so they're still students that should be considered and counted for.
But if the student should, but if the school is not eligible to receive tuition, my point was, if the school is not eligible to receive tuition,
Should they still be on there?
this map. To me, that's just confusion, it's just noise. Like, I hear you on your students, but the list of schools approved to accept tuition that is on the agency website is not the same as the list of
Correct.
schools that have been entered into this database. So I don't know I don't know why they're different.
Well, this is all independent schools. And if you'd like me to break it out.
That'd be great.
That would be great, show them where kids
data,
are.
yeah, both data
Okay.
sets.
Okay. That'd be fantastic if we could work with just the ones that we know are part of the maps.
Since Act 73.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you want me to remove
July.
the other independent schools?
I don't know, because then you're not counting those kids.
Do they show
Anywhere,
up differently though on ADM for SU, or like there's, the LEA is responsible for them somewhere, so is there a different distribution that counts the kids, not where they're going? Like, I think about, like, thinking of any of these school districts, like South Carolina kids probably are not just the kids that are in that building, but the kids that are responsible for tuitioning, right? Somewhere that's
Yes. you're
counted
correct.
for somewhere.
You were asking, how does the state know how many kids are?
No, like one of our maps probably does that. Does one of our maps going by school district count
There's,
total students, not just those that are in the buildings, but rather those that, for whom they are responsible, pre-K 12?
Right now, we've got, if you select these
Town
school
ADM or
districts,
something, right?
you'll have,
Corresponds to population.
right, it is not symbolized in any way that would tell you how many students. If you select it, you'll see, you should see the number of public school students, but it wouldn't be hard to create a map if you would like it shaded by number of students by district or SU.
now you've totally got me confused, because ADM is by definition the number of students who've been counted as part of the public system, and that includes students who are tuitioned to approved independent schools. There is extremely little regulation of recognized schools. In fact, I don't even know if the counts there are accurate, because I don't know. Maybe Lauren could speak to whether they're accurate. But my point is, if we think we're talking about recognized schools here, then this is a whole different conversation than I thought we were having.
But I mean, Beth brings up a good point, because there are a lot of kids who are also homeschooled who could someday end up being part of a school district, or, you know.
I was just having that same thought about homeschool kids. They're not at any of these schools, but it could be next year. Yeah.
But that's true now.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna
So
We picked up, my work
it's part of our
picked up
ADM.
homeschooling students all the time in the middle school, but the variation wasn't.
We're
that
probably
big
getting in the
all
weeds.
time.
I guess for the purpose of, limiting it to the work that we are required to do, I think it would be really helpful to make sure that the map that we have address, kids who are being tuitioned to approved independent schools,
I want to know.
that are, post Act 73, that are still included in that list. So,
So why don't I break those out and then still leave the option to toggle on for anyone who's interested. The other
okay,
is not approved,
Sure.
the right term for
recognize.
recognized.
Well, they're approved, but ineligible to receive public tuition.
Or recognize.
And recognized. Those are three
Yeah,
categories
3 categories.
in such. So
Well,
using
yeah, it's more
that.
complex.
Good, that would be helpful.
No, the law had more complexity.
Thank you. Maybe John, maybe you stay here.
Yeah.
Question. Okay, so population distribution, anything else on that? That was, sorry, I'm taking over Jen's talking points, but that was where we were.
For data, I know we
Yeah.
talked about this earlier, John, I really appreciate you doing this, but it is helpful to know where pre-K students are, because many rural schools, because there are not a lot of private providers, are completely dependent on their public elementaries to provide pre-kindergarten. So if you're not counting those kids as enrolled, you're actually, you're not giving an accurate statement on the utilization of that building. And I've had this in some of our conversations. I know, Beth, you've got this up in your area too.
Yeah.
So when we're trying to assess how much capacity is in a building, we actually need to know if there are pre-K students located in that building.
It's so important. That actually is very critical. We have a lot of capacity in our public schools. There are empty classrooms and open seats, and, if we want to increase capacity and scale.
Well, it depends if you build it as pre-K or not.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying, that there might be room for pre-K students. So why aren't we, using those existing structures to maximize efficiency and cost effectiveness?
There's some other definite reasons that we have the mixed model for pre-K still.
I understand.
learned about it this year.
Sit on the helping welfare committee.
Too regular.
If the interest is looking at it for like building capacity, one idea might be AOE has population per building. So there could be buildings that have even more, people that are not necessarily students or within the pre-K system. So we could include population by facility, and that includes your staff, any students, and anyone else who might be in those buildings, as well as square footage.
You can make that a map.
We
Turn that into a map.
certainly.
That'd be great.
I think the challenge there is being super clear on what's in and what's not in. And part of the challenge with making sense of the data is the labeling isn't always clear. So it's just really, because it could be very different if you're in Springfield, where you've got a community college co-located with Vermont Virtual Learning, co-located with a tech center, co-located with a school. You just kind of need to know what's in that bucket in order to be able to make sense of the capacity. And another meaningful measure of it is, what was the population 25 years ago versus the total number of bodies there now? Because I think that's sort of a measure of the functional capacity. And then you have places, there are a couple of high schools that really ought to be taken offline. So they have no capacity as far as I'm concerned, but.
And it may be worth pointing out that I think some of this is already accessible in AOE's facilities dashboard.
There's a lot of great information. If Bob Donahue's listening, thank you. He's been doing a lot of work
Very
around that.
helpful.
Thank you. Okay, great. So go, Jen, you wanna?
Yeah, tipped out. Did you do D? Did you
No,
just do
no,
D? No. Oh, well, facilities.
We're getting there.
Right?
Bob Downey
We're
did
just
our-
talking about
Yeah,
facilities?
we segued.
Location capacity and facility condition index score of current school buildings.
That's in there.
So the location is there, the capacity is there. What about the facilities, the AOE facilities page? Does that integrate with the map?
The map has a score for building capacity.
This has the facility condition index, and the AOE dashboard lets you drill down to the level of detail where I think you can look at vents and whatnot and their conditions.
Can you pull that facilities map up?
The dashboard, the
Oh,
AOE dashboard.
it's not a map here. We don't have it on here.
The FCI.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it's not
Can you just sort of run through it for us? Just so like how it would work?
currently, if you select a school, you'll see the condition index pop up there. It's also included in the school district builder right now.
Mm-hmm.
If you expand, you can see in this view, it's yellow, green, or red, and if you hover over, you'll get the category which it's in, either 0 to 10 or 10 to 30 or 30 to 65.
That's really helpful. I mean, another question would be, what is that index? What is that score? How does that inform our work? I mean, is there a certain score level where we're like, oh gosh, we don't want to tap into that building any more than it already, I'm not proposing an answer, I'm proposing a question.
So,
How does the index translate into what the work that we're doing? Yeah.
so we make a map and we overlay that, and one of these districts, all of the schools have a facilities index in the basement. So then the question is it wise to make that district based on our goals?
I think another way it matters. I mean, I've had a couple of people reach out and say, oh, well, I don't want to take on the bond from that district. But I think people also have to understand that a building that hasn't been maintained is a form of debt. It's an unfunded liability. So maybe it also just reminds people that, this goes both ways. I don't know. I mean, there's certain districts that have been able to bond and everyone's paying for that. There are other districts that haven't been able to bond, so they don't bring debt, but they also bring an unfunded liability. If your building is in bad shape.
Right.
I don't know if this would be helpful, but one thing that we could do is there are, I think, 5, 10 and 20-year estimates for costs associated with each school. We could add these, and when you generate the report from the district builder, it could sum up all of those costs. And I would ask AOE which are the most relevant, or if that is actually helpful or not.
Thank you, Jay.
Just before I left my former district, we had contracted with an architect to review the facility condition assessments that we got from, we actually had already contracted with Bureau Veritas before the state did. So we had actually, they did it twice. And the cost estimates were extremely low. So I just want us to proceed with caution when we start to factor in those figures, and maybe even consult with some folks who can let us know that how far off they are.
Yeah, I would just add to Jay, I used Veritas, it was called something before that twice too, I did it. And a lot of times they use figures from down south, like Virginia, Maryland, so the costs were way skewed. And so I would highly recommend using a Vermont firm to get Vermont prices, labor, blah, blah, blah. So it can be very skewed. Yes, Jen?
So the Blaine and Veritas folks who did that, they did all the schools in the state, so if they're low, they're consistently low, right? So
That's when you did it too, though.
Can I just speak to this? I've been on 2 school construction task forces, and it was common knowledge that the numbers that we were getting were low. That is pre-tariff, and so there is an understanding that the estimates are low, and there's also, if you look at the numbers, they are incredibly high. So it really gives you pause, because it's in the billions of dollars, and that is, again, like a low estimate. So I just want to acknowledge that, and it's all on there. Like I said, Bob Donahue's been doing great work, as well as Joe Briggs Campbell. So I recommend that every member of this task force, when you get a chance, take a look at that, what's on there, the index. It's really.
Each school.
Jen?
So I'm wondering, in the context of D, do we want to rely on that facilities condition index score based on what you just said, Chris, about depending on when they're done? I mean, my sense of it is that they're consistently low across the state, a similar amount, exceedingly low, but should we use those for comparative purposes among districts?
Well, this is the condition score, not the cost.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
I
would use it.
I would use it. Yeah. I agree. I think there's still a lot of really great work there, and it's ongoing. So I absolutely think we should use it. And if the time comes when we get serious about building some schools and fixing some schools, then we can talk in a little bit more depth about getting some actual estimates that are accurate and up to date and inflationary, take into consider inflation and so on and so forth. So, but it's a starting point. Yep. Okay.
So E, transportation and employment patterns and practices.
Those are just so small, like maybe we just skip that one. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Little levity.
Well, I guess the question is, when the conference committee put this in, what was in their minds? What did they think they were asking for?
There's only one person here, I believe, that was on the conference committee, so I can only ask him to answer that.
When the conference committee wrote down that one of the things that we need to consider is transportation and employment patterns and practices, I feel like there's some assumptions there that maybe didn't make it into the language. So what is it that you were looking for?
I don't think the conference committee put that.
I think it was in the bill.
It was in the bill? Okay,
We didn't
whoever
touch
wrote that,
We didn't touch that.
whatever, whoever wrote it, what is that about?
I may be misremembering, but I think it was even in the House version as it left my committee, and I know transportation is an issue that needs to be considered, even though Vermont legally doesn't have to provide transportation.
I'm speaking about employment patterns and.
I think it had to do some with feeding patterns for schools, and to follow that, because we need to look at the feeding patterns. Some of that goes back to pre-K. And why aren't they in public schools? Well, I work in this town and there's a pre-K and a private daycare in this town. That's where I'm gonna send my kid, not to the one at the public school, because I never go there. So I think it had to do with the feeding patterns, if I remember correctly.
So I guess I was just wondering, whose employment patterns? Was it teachers or was it the?
I think it was the
children?
the parents and families, not the staff,
Mm.
if I remember correct.
That's helpful.
So how do
And it was more about, I don't know how we can capture that, but it was more, I think, about the transportation.
So when I think about transportation, one thing I'm thinking about, and the same is true for food services, is there's been extraordinary consolidation in that industry. And, so you could have 10 districts side by side, all doing separate contracts with the same company.
Yes.
It makes no sense. And this is why when you're noodling, you're thinking, that should be something that's moved up a level. You should do a regional contract for the bus or for the food service instead of doing 5 contracts with the same person.
Well, that is one of those things. So, hypothetically, a county map would allow for a lot more collaboration across a wider geographic area. But yes.
So one of the things when we're talking about transportation is whether it's kept in-house or whether it's contracted, because I think that makes a difference in lots of different ways. One of the ways is exactly what Rebecca said, right? Multiple contracts doesn't make sense. But if it's in-house and you're going to require someone to contract, does that make sense? So I don't know how to get that on here. I don't know if that's data that is collected or not, but I think that's a piece of information.
wonder if E is more about the patterns of what route people take than it is about what bus services we're using.
I think so. I think
And how do we get that data on, and Jay, you were saying that you could look at where everybody lived and map it to the schools, the one that looked like a. Yeah,
This is the bad, once we have the data put in, you can get the actual.
you could do
routes.
that.
Yeah.
And how do you capture though the employment patterns? Is there economic data to capture that?
Can you put that back?
Yeah, so what I'm showing here, you have, here's just total jobs, but here you can have the commuter flows. So that by town of origin and job location. Those, I think, would be the two main things you currently have on your map.
I don't know what it's like in other border areas. You can't make meaningful conversation around the Upper Valley if you're not including New Hampshire, because the job density across the river is as high as it is.
Yeah, we cut off areas that exited Vermont just for legibility, because there are people who commute to all, lots of different parts in surrounding states, and the map gets pretty busy. But
What are those actual data points? Is that?
this is all from location, employment, household dynamics from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the census together,
So it's literally where people live and where they're going to.
where they commute to.
Me too, yeah.
And it's aggregated to the town level, so I don't know if we grab the centroid of the town, but it's not exactly where they, it's just by town.
So if we used this data, but we zoomed in on each county with the schools, would that be an effective tool to get at E?
Is that a question for the task force or for?
Yeah.
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 to me, this is the data. That, what's up there is this information. So if there's going to be a decision or evaluation that we make, I think we have this information, right, John? This is the information that you have up. Maybe if you zoom in on one area, it'll make more sense to,
look more usable.
Yeah, even more interesting when you back out and you see how far people are traveling. I mean, people are going all the way to Burlington from Beaver Valley.
There's some that go to Burlington from my area, but they don't do it every day.
That's actually a really interesting point because that probably has changed over the last handful of years. And I mean, maybe this is the best level of data we need around this point because in isolation will not be the driving factor for maps. I think it's helpful to understand, but maybe not necessarily any more so than understanding current tuition patterns. Because in a K-12 operating school district, I'm not sure that there's as much to attend to as maybe the case where it's K-8 district and where they tuition their high school kids may align with where they're going to work or where the bus is being sent up from. And so I feel satisfied that that's enough level of data for that point to help inform our discussions.
Thank you. Yeah, Jack,
John, what was the overlay you just put on? The
orange?
orange, yeah?
That's average annual data.
Oh, okay.
Overlay.
Yeah.
It's actually so that addresses a lot of the issues.
Okay. Thank you. All right, I think we want to move on to F.
So F, we did the grand list, you did that. Yeah, so I think that's,
Do we want to flesh it out a little bit? Why it's important, why it might be a data point that we want to use, or are folks satisfied with?
Hard for me to talk about the homestead exemption because it keeps changing and that makes it,
Aren't we moving away from an exemption to a credit?
well, we're moving away from a credit, but the eligibility threshold is dropping
Right.
and property values are increasing.
Right.
And I don't know that we actually have a good, I don't know what the right measure is of capacity to pay at this point. Because if, there's very differential growth in property value across different communities.
Income?
The 84 and 85-year-old couple who wrote to me, they have no increase in their income. Their property has doubled in
Right.
value in the last couple of years. And they're not,
Mm-hmm.
like their status
Mm-hmm.
hasn't changed.
Yep. Okay.
That's a good question for those of you who, where we landed on the law on this relationship. And I appreciate your question, Senator Beck, because I'm trying to understand too if it still matters and why it matters for that extra 5% that could be voted on. Is it about the part of the law that is looking at the funding versus the allocation? But it is in the law that we need to attend to it. So obviously I think we need to. And did the law, I don't remember where it landed, get to homestead versus non-homestead so that that's uniformly handled throughout the state? I don't remember what came out of that.
In the formula, it's a statewide funding system. All grant lists are shared across the state. There is no local. Homestead or otherwise.
So did it end up being resolved that a tax rate for homestead versus non-homestead is going to be set across the state?
Yeah.
So some communities where now like non-homestead is charged less, that'll be
There will be,
equalized in a statewide way.
well, right now we have some homesteads are higher than the non-homestead. Most of them are still lower, but under the foundation formula, I think the non-homestead will always be higher than the uniform homestead.
For everywhere, even though right now that's not true.
Yes.
Okay, so
Right
then,
now we don't have a
remedy.
uniform homestead.
no, right, so nothing will be local about that rate.
Nothing.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was trying.
there's a whole lot of functions embedded in that. I mean, I think we're also, there's a lot of things that we have to get through to get to that point.
Yeah, like, adopting that.
That's
All right, G, student demographics.
We have some of them, we don't have all of them still.
Are there specific demographics defined that we need or want?
For mapping?
I mean, it's a very general term.
I mean, I think, Chris and I asked early on if there were any kind of projections for what we're imagining for future student population in Vermont and where it might be.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, I think student demographics are important. I think it's why we're here. We've gone from 120,000 students to 80, and so it's relevant.
So we have the number of students in each school. Do we want to also overlay other subgroups such as free and reduced FRL students, free and reduced lunch, poverty? Other subcategories, IEP students. There are some school districts that have 35% students on IEPs and others who have 18%.
It's a really good question. Yeah, okay.
Couldn't we get population growth models per county by county? In our budget process, we always include our student ones, our enrollment projections. And I know that the census data, I would think.
It's just challenging though, because it's gonna be so responsive. I'm just thinking of where we are right now, and it's actually affecting how people move into or don't move into town right now. So I think I think we're prognosticating, but if people respond to perceived incentives, it's gonna change population.
Is that true?
In terms of what's currently available, I do believe at least for several counties with the housing needs assessment, there were some projections done out, I think, to maybe 2030 and 2050. Statewide, I think easily I can access projections to 2030. Going beyond that would need to be just work that gets done, and either ACCD has or others have or haven't done that, or that's something we could look into if there's interest. I think understanding specifically if it's just a projection and age cohorts you're interested in, or other variables.
I mean, I'm interested. I know Oliver Wyman did it to 2040 for hospital catchment areas. So, I mean, I just find it interesting. It's a thought experiment, and it may or may not come to fruition, but it gives us at least something to think about as we are looking to the future. Rebecca?
Well, I think this goes to Representative Quimby's point as well. I mean, what was so striking about those projections is, again, how old some of our counties are. And I will consider myself in the gray-haired group to put myself there. But the reality is some of us aren't going to be around in 30 years. And the million-dollar question is what happens to that housing stock? I mean, we have the same population in housing, but our families are smaller now because there's more seniors, which means we have fewer kids, but we don't know what will happen in 20 years.
Yes, and I mean,
thinking-
birth rates are definitely down, and I don't think they're
Okay,
suddenly
that's
going to spike to like 10 kids. per family.
That's driving changes in, that's never been what drives changes in the population. It's always been population. We've always had, that's always been our story.
Right.
That's what I was actually thinking, and I think that makes maybe what I was suggesting less important, but I was thinking we must have at least birth rates, like projected age 5 census, like that type of information probably is available, and I just don't know if it's one of the clicks that I haven't done to know our birth to 5 expectations or numbers by these communities.
Currently, there's nothing that's forward-looking. That what I'm showing the map now is 2000 to 2020, a percent change. And it'd be fairly easy to add any kind of age cohort population numbers. But for projections, I think you could add something going out to 2030 after that. We don't have currently have a data source for it, but we can look into it.
Okay, thank you. I would just like to bring it back to, and I'm not asking for an answer today, but I think it's something we all should be pondering between now and the 29th when we meet next, which is around free and reduced lunch, which is around levels of poverty and so on. When we're thinking about combining districts, I mean, that could be super consequential in terms of outcomes. And I think it's something that we should be considering. I think it's important.
Can you help me understand your thinking on that? Like, how is it consequential?
I mean, it's consequential because I am imagining that there will be more needs and high needs in a district that would have higher poverty levels, everything from literacy rates to food services to all kinds of things. I wasn't a superintendent, so I'm sure you two could speak more to that than I could. But if you're combining, high wealth, if you're combining wealthy districts, it's just going to look different. And what is that going to mean for work in those communities? And what's that going to mean for the work that we do? I think it's important to consider, because we could be creating a lot of work for one district and maybe not as much work for another district. Jen, Jay, do you have anything to say to that as experts?
In the context of map making, if you're fence sitting on where a group of districts should go or join, I think having that data helps you make that decision in a broad sense.
With all the caveats, that there could be change, like Rebecca was saying. I'm just looking at Chittenden County's population forecast. They go out to 2050. But I'm not finding similar data from the other counties.
It's because the ends are too small. It's very unreliable.
Yeah.
So student demographics, we just have students' population projections. Do people feel like FRL and IEP should also be on there?
I think IEP ties directly into high staffing levels and salary scales. If one town has a 30% IEP rate, that's going to need more staffing, more cost potentially. I mean, so IEP, I think is important to me if we're trying to level the playing field and know what everyone's getting.
I think too, there's some parallel
No, go ahead. And then
study happening around the provisional special ed services for the state of Vermont, right? Like there's a strategic design special ed services or something. There's another study, I think in this law, and our legislators might remember.
Extraordinary special ed.
Okay.
Also. Should do all of it.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But either way, I don't think it's not significant. I think it's information that would be helpful to have, if nothing else, because it tells us. I think what almost might be worse is if the combining of a high FRL district and a low FRL district masks the needs of the district broadly, because now it's diluted and the population collectively makes that less obvious. I think weights are going to be, as I'm remembering and understanding that part of the law, will be related to the student. So that is also accounted for, and I guess how the funding will come to districts. I think it's helpful information to have if it's accessible data.
If it's possible, it would be great.
Yes.
I have to just say though, if a district is identifying 35% of its students as having a disability, there is something wrong. There just is something wrong. The national average is 15%. Vermont is 19%. And what we're saying is that 1 in 3 kids in Vermont in that region has a disability. That's a very significant label to put on someone. And there is so much information that suggests that we are off course in our delivery of special education right now, that I think any data like that, we need to be looking at in the context of other data, but also asking hard questions about systems delivery. And I 100% agree. Chris, you are right on. That is, again, if you look at our drivers of cost, It is staffing, and the staffing is often related to special education. But our outcomes are not great. And so we have to be asking if the way we're supporting our kids with disabilities is the right way to support, and that is a systems leadership issue. It is not just a school district issue, and we're not going to fix it with districting.
And it's not the purview of this committee, this task force.
Which was, I think,
So-
why I was raising.
I'm
there's that
very
setting
careful,
happening, because
because
I'm
we
not
don't-
sure the
because if
nature
it's-
is staffing.
Right,
to
but it's
solve
not, but you could redistrict, tell Kingdom
Yeah.
Come, and it still would not address the fact if we have assistance failure on the instruction side.
So are you suggesting it should or shouldn't be in G?
I'm just saying you have to be extremely careful. I think, and this is where I go back to whoever said you got to lay out your assumptions, because I'm not sure when you see that 35%, what I would want to do is go in and look at their practice. I don't think redistricting addresses that, but I would hate to make, just like you don't want to reward someone in your funding formula for bad behavior, you're going to make sure you're not, privileging someone in a redistricting process for perhaps a failure of practice.
I think ELL, there a lot of bucketing information that we would get out of student demographics could be really helpful in concentrating resources. You know how many languages are spoken in your district, in Winooski's district, and you get to other parts of the state, and that's less likely the case. And so I think if we're gathering demographic information on our students, it could be inclusive of that information, which is a staffing and resource consideration.
Thanks. Jen?
So it sounds like student population and FRL, IEP, and ELL with a very clear caveat of maybe or maybe not using them.
Yeah.
We've gotten to G, we have H. What are your thoughts on the timing and?
If we could go fairly quickly, just because 3:00 is public comment, I think we could do our 2:00 fairly quickly. But yeah,
So H, that's liabilities, debt, assets of current school districts. So we have that information, right? We have the facilities. Does the state keep a record of contingency funds or stabilization funds or
Reserves.
reserve funds?
Yeah, well, we do the stat report every year.
And so that goes into the stat report.
You're supposed to include it.
Yeah.
Data goes all over the place, but I did. You put all your different. Yeah.
What happened?
And you have to turn your audit in by March 31st, so like FY25 audit will be done. Will be due at the state, so everyone should know if there's a surplus, deficit, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah,
And again, you gotta be so careful with that, and the legislature's been burned by that before, because you think about the cap they put in the context of Act 46, because it's a timing issue. If someone has negotiated, they'll negotiate a food service contract, so it bubbles in the third year, because they're cap. Or they'll save money now to bank on a bond or an investment they're making. You're catching people a moment in time, but you don't know how that moment sits relative to somebody else's moment in time.
Do you think that that reserve account's gonna be zeroed out before that merger happens? That you can be sure
That I'm
of.
pretty sure, that I'm pretty sure about, Scott, but that's my point.
The liability notes, but the asset, that's all.
If they're running, they're running 24 million or whatever, $100 million businesses, they're making business decisions. And we don't know what those decisions are when we look at staff.
Kim?
I guess to that, I would say if they are zeroed out, they might, I would presume, mean they're tending to facilities needs with the capital reserve fund if those were protected for that purpose. So potentially, or in theory, or in good practice, if there was a bringing it to zero and there was a capital investment for, the assets of the prior to merger district, you could imagine that those assets might be invested in, I don't know, maybe not the roof, but maybe, I don't know, whatever their food service need, something that comes within what is defined as able to be spent in their capital reserve fund. And it might go to zero before, but then I think the flip side of that is the facility itself might be in less of a deficit space than it would have been before that
I'm
investment.
not casting blame, but I think there are very few districts that have been able to keep up with their infrastructure needs. It's just, it's been an impossibility for most schools and most districts.
The yellow on the table that you showed speaks to that.
Yeah, but No, that's a good point. Okay, moving on.
Well, I guess one of the things I'm seeing happening is we go to one of these, talk about the data, and then we sort of dive into details and questions on whether it is. And to get back to H, does it work to use those stat sheets? Do we have that data? Should that be the comparative data we use in evaluating a map?
The best we got.
It's the best we got. Okay, next, staffing levels and salary schedules. Should we just look at negotiated agreements and highs and lows? What should we look at?
I think one of the reasons we were trying to get the agency to provide some of the kinds of teacher data that was in the teacher equity report is that we know that districts that pay more have more longitude. I mean, the teachers tend to stay in that job longer, and so they're more advanced on the salary scale. So if you start leveling up, do you reasonably expect that in districts that have been paying a lot less? Well, all of a sudden, if you've gone from making 80,000 to 100,000, maybe you don't retire, maybe you stay for more years. So we just don't know. And if we don't know where teachers are currently on that salary schedule, we actually don't know what the implications of merging are as people move. So I think this may be what we have access to, but we're ballparking. We should be assuming that we have all the answers here.
Rep Branning?
Yeah, so just to add to what Rebecca said, I think that if it is possible to get how long the staff has been in those, the average length of time in position, that would be helpful there. The other piece that's going to be incredibly helpful there is cost of living in region or county or whatever that is, because salary scales, in my experience, have been because of the cost of living in those as well.
So seniority, cost of living, sort of distribution across a salary scale, but that is asking business managers to probably give that. I don't know if that's currently gathered.
Well, every school district does a staffing report that they send in, and it asks a whole bunch of questions that this is included on, and I don't know how.
That's what
Torin is nodding that it seems like something that, yeah, okay, thank you.
it's in the.
He's gonna look into it.
I'll see.
Okay, great.
J, opportunity to support local elementary schools, central middle schools, and regional high schools with the least disruption to students.
I think the data you've been speaking about, Jay, would be extremely helpful in terms of thinking about the centroids, if you will. Those would be the regional high schools. To me, getting an accurate list of the independent schools that are in the system is really important to evaluate access to high schools in those regions.
Do we have indicators that we're looking for to describe local, central, and regional? Do we know what we would consider those indicators to help define that?
So I think the map, the meteoroids, what did you call them?
Centroids.
Centroid, thank you. So I think that like we can define that arbitrarily now, or we can look at what schools exist and look at, if you're here and you're looking and the nearest high school is 75 miles away versus 5 miles.
And I would say, if you look at the table that I made, I mean, there really are quite a few of our counties don't have a middle school. They have either K-8 model or, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 counties with 0 middle schools. So we haven't even talked about possible grade reconfigurations in this whole mix too.
We don't do that. That's not.
Yeah.
Junior high model instead of middle school. Yes, Wendy.
Just local schools. I just thought that a local school would be within a town. It's a town area. Yeah.
But that is not the case currently. So if we were defining that, we would be undoing bringing multiple towns together to educate in a manner that can have a reasonable peer group for students and have opportunity to educate at each grade level with peers. And so I guess I would just say, I don't think we would want to say that local elementary means every town has an elementary school. I don't think
we have the students to support that.
I think we have to be careful of defining things too narrowly, because that was a conversation we had way back when we were talking about like out-of-state tuition. Well, within 25 miles. Well, what if the closest school is 26 miles? Or I think when you get too narrow on your definitions, you're gonna find so many exceptions to that definition. So I'm okay with, at this point in time, just leaving the terms local, central, and regional, and just having a sense about what those terms mean. I agree for now. Anyway, yeah, I think that's not a bad idea. Maybe as we move forward, we can hone in, but, Jen, sorry, we have a few hands up here. Let's go with John and then, Michael.
That's okay. Let's do
Just one thing I'll point out about the school district builder, which I think at the first meeting I presented as, here's a prototype for you and to show you what's possible. Tell me how it can be helpful for you. One of the things I did, you notice on the table here, you have like SU intact. So that tells you whether the districts you've created keeps those supervisory unions intact. There's also regional planning commission status. So if there are existing boundaries that you find particularly helpful or useful, we can integrate this into the tool, and you could potentially use that as a measure of whether or not the districts you create are, how aligned they are with some of those existing communities as measured by those potential boundaries. I just wanted to make you aware that that's why I included that. It was a nod to that. Maybe it's useful, maybe it isn't, but wanted to highlight that.
Thank you for that. Okay,
Access to CTE.
you two are gonna fix that for us, right?
We have.
Okay.
We'll report on it.
All right.
And define what access means.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah.
How, in Linden Institute and St. Johnsbury Academy, how do students decide which campus they're taking CTE on?
Depends on where the program is offered. For example, Linden has welding, St. Johnsbury does not. So if you're a St. Johnsbury Academy student and you want to take welding, use it, but
Okay.
yeah. And then we have programs they don't have in there.
Do you have duplicate programs?
No, we have some things like, like one school might have an intro welding class, but the real welding is at one school.
And that tech advisory board is similar to the other ones in the state, and they meet in 20.
Yeah.
And this is, I'm sure, more detailed than we necessarily need, but then would a ninth grader interested in welding from St. J go to Linden? For 9th, 10th, 11th?
No, St. Johnsbury Academy has an intro to welding class. So the child could take, the academy student could take intro to welding, but if they decide they want to take the full-blown welding, then they would have to go up to Linden.
At what grade?
11.
So more like a traditional CTE, where
Evolves,
11th
yeah,
and 12th are the
evolves.
grades for which CTE tuition is paid.
Part-time program?
Well, we don't, St. J and Linden is very unusual. They don't charge the school districts a CTE. It's
Right,
it's
all students,
every-
9
all
through
students
12,
get all CTE.
pay the CTE rate. That's why I was asking if they were pursuing a particular CTE program, would attend a different campus.
Oh, now if that's easy. If a St. Johnsbury kid, I don't know if there's such a thing, but if they wanted to attend, they wanted to go down to Riverbend, down at Oxbow for something, I don't know what that would be. Then the money would just fall.
It's the scheduling and programming of it is not dissimilar to a child at CVU who's deciding to go to either Essex Tech or Burlington Tech,
Right.
freshman, sophomore year, they maybe do a part day, and then junior, senior year. It's not the exact same, but it's a similar construct. It's just two independent schools that have the tech.
Understood, and I was just confused by it because protected in the law was the ability to charge CTE tuition for the integrated CTE for 9 through 12. So I was
No.
confused.
They were allowed to continue to set their tuition. Tuition is always included on CTE. They don't charge, they are not allowed to charge. I think it goes back to federal law and Perkins and everything, but they're not allowed to, they are not allowed to charge a different tuition for a kid that's taking CTE than a kid that is not taking CTE. They have to charge one tuition. So that's why it's one tuition and you get all the CTE you want. It's not that dissimilar from other CTEs that, for example, Stafford has a CTE tuition, and it's charged to anybody from a district outside of Rutland.
Sure.
If they want to go to Stafford, then Stafford charges them a tuition for being a CTE student.
Right, for grades 9 through 12?
For whatever years they're eligible for CTE.
I thought I understood it. to
Literally,
be
schools of
11.
choice where the money follows the student.
Yeah. But all CTEs, and that's kind of where that whole
Right, it's
conversation.
an average, rolling average tuition of however many semesters, right? 6
No.
per average.
All CTEs in the state of Vermont get to set their own tuition rate. And so that's where the conversation came in with saying, Jay, well, how do they do that since they can't charge a different tuition rate for CTE? So they continued with their current tuition set.
Right, thank you. Yes.
So then, based on that, how come Missisquoi and Canaan were included in the conversation?
I don't know everything. I think they are so small that they're not wrapped up into Perkins and they're kind of treated differently, but there's some details there that I'm not really aware of. But they're different and I'm not really I don't really understand.
They're called comprehensive high
Yeah.
schools, the way, so if they're got the same labeling and categorization before the federal government, why would they have a different standard?
I don't know, and I'm not sure that they can't set their own tuition rate for CTE. I think they can.
Those are interesting questions. We can flesh them out perhaps at another time. We have 15 minutes left before we have to go to public comment. And number 11 on our agenda does actually have some action items to it. So I think it's important that we segue. Sorry about that. We didn't quite finish this this table. Yeah, Jen, yay, thank you. Thank you for leading that conversation and for all the work. Yeah, I kind of think so too. We touched on it. Number 11, well, first of all, it says of the 3 proposed plans to date, we actually only had 2 because we weren't able to do CTE. Do we want to further develop any of these? So I'm not even sure we can ask that question because we haven't seen the CTE map yet. So maybe we leave that one for next time. How are people feeling about that? Do we want to leave it for next time? Okay, once we have the CTE. What other options do we want to explore for the next meeting? So this would be an action item for folks to work on between now and the 29th. Are there any other maps or any other options that we would like to explore? Yes, Representative Holcomb.
I'm very concerned about the cost and quality and fairness considerations because I think there's no fairness if there's no affordability. And I think there's no quality if there's no affordability. The only thing that we've talked about that I see offering an opportunity to address those drivers is the BOCES. And I'd love to see us look at how we develop some kind of model for shared services that could work in tandem with some of the other proposals being put on the table or as a standalone proposal. But I'd love to see some subset of this group talking about regional sharing of services.
I would second, I would like enthusiastically share your suggestion or support your suggestion, just being out and about listening to folks. I keep hearing over and over and over again, is there a way for us to have greater sharing of resources across a larger geographic area? And, you know, can we be thinking creatively about this? So I think it's a great idea. Do we have any volunteers who would like to take that on between now and the 29th? Start to explore it. It doesn't have to be fully fleshed, as we know. It certainly doesn't have to be fully fleshed out, but just to start exploring. Jay has his hand up.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jay. Great.
Even though that's not exactly a map, could this template still be used?
It actually could be a map if we thought outside the box.
Okay.
Yeah, great. I'd be happy to help you with that.
Thank you so much. So we've got Representative Holcomb and Jay Bottoms working on a possibly, we're just going to call it a BOCES map.
Did you say someone was coming to this meeting to talk about BOCES?
Next meeting.
I wonder if well,
To talk about the Vermont, you know, incarnation of a BOCES, which is what we're going to learn about. Yeah. So,
There's only one.
when did you want to?
Well, just a segue, a couple of the things that we didn't get to, the next one was maximization of cost efficiencies, and that's totally BOCES, I think. So I think we already have a place for it in the rubric. And I would suggest that we talk about the rubric the next meeting before we talk about new maps.
So, yep. So okay. We've got anything else that anyone would like to see or work on between now and the 29th, Jay?
Well, I guess we talked about changing the problem statements to reflect our input collectively.
Yeah.
So I think knocking that out, and then maybe that's how we do that. We follow up on Senator Harrison's recommendation on the test.
Who's going to do that?
I have that on my to-do list for you and I to make the edits. The draft based on the input people had here. That's one of my to-dos. I assumed.
So we can work with Sue on that.
I can send you some.
Great.
Thank you, Representative Quimby. That's great. And everyone should have Sue's email address. Well, let's make sure we get that shared between now and the end of the meeting. Yes.
And we will do the recommendation for engagement plan with Sue's help.
Great. So that's the only other exploration that we have for the next meeting, the BOCES map. We have on here, what is our general strategy for selection of plans, options, and people to develop? How are we going to select maps?
Might be easier to decide when we have at least one to look at.
That's true. Let's wait on that.
We're ready for that, yes.
It's a little premature. Okay. Okay. Yeah, Jen.
I wonder if after the BOCES, it would make sense to take the county map and shred it in context of the rubric to come up with a map option. I don't mean shred, I mean deal with the Hazens and the
Adjust.
Caledonia. Shred.
Tweak.
Adjust.
Tweak.
Massage.
I mean, that would be interesting.
We should get the data from GFO too, because they did a lot of the financial analysis behind that. They actually threw Grand Isle in with Franklin and Essex in with, wasn't Caledonia.
I don't remember.
It was only,
So that's the size of the state.
yeah, but there was only 12. They decided, instead of doing 14 units, they were modeling 12 units. It's more like and then they broke Chittenden into east and west Chittenden, so it was, I think, 13 units instead.
So should we look at that JFO map?
Chrissy's gonna send it out to everyone. I just sent the modeling to everyone. Yeah, Chrissy.
I think that's something that Representative Granning and I can do, just because I was in the finance committee. We saw a lot of that there, and I think Rep Granning is also where she sits would be. I'm sure they took a look at that. So we will make sure that we get the JFO information to Chrissy and Sarah and get it out to folks so that we can take a look at it. Yeah. Anything else before we move to public comment?
Can I ask a few clarifying questions?
Oh, yes, you certainly may.
Okay, so these aren't me trying to get up to speed. Is the rubric and the template, are those the same thing or are those two different things?
I think that the rubric is embedded in.
One is blank, the other is backward. So it's the same information, one just runs it through.
And did people approve that this is the template that's going to be used, or does it still, the blank template, or does it still need to be refined?
I know there needs to be some adjustments based on what Jane and because that's part of this.
I understood that we were looking at it independently before the next meeting. If people are going to come back to the next meeting.
Okay. So the review is everybody, the refinement, you all are taking the lead on. So it will be the same one with some refinement based on the problem statements. Okay.
I mean, I think, just correct me if I'm wrong, Senator Harrison, you were the one who brought up, I think, the idea of a rubric to begin with. Wasn't it more to be able to sort of assess each map so that we can clearly in the report speak to that?
That's what I would have, yes, that's what I would like to have suggested, or I would suggest. To me, this is the rubric, fleshed out. Once it's fleshed out, this is the rubric. And we would use, just definitions and, what we have, and some points we don't have, and we probably can't, the opportunity to support local elementary schools. There's not a data set for that, but we'll just have to use our judgment.
There seems like there were a bunch of data requests, and so I just didn't completely have clarity on who's responsible for fulfilling some of those. So I didn't know if there's people who are going to know who they are.
I mean, I think it's all going to be, other than the joint fiscal data, which Representative Granning and I will be getting, I think it's probably all going to be to the AOE, although some of it might be taken on by ADS, but I'll let you two, sort that out. Okay.
Okay, so AOE and ADS are going to work together on fulfilling some of those requests. And you had volunteered to write some paragraphs that explain some of the limitations of data and for some recommendations. Offered that this morning. It seems like there's still tech issues going on, and so I didn't know if somebody is going to be addressing those between now and the next meeting.
I think the AOA staff will be addressing it, and I'll do what I can, and I know that my co-chair, Rep. Granning, will as well. It is an ongoing concern, and we hope to have it all straightened out and dialed in for our next meeting on the 29th.
And then the SBA was going to do a survey, and someone was going to reach out to them to request that they send it to everybody and not just the SBA members. So I didn't know if there's a particular person who.
That's me. Thank you very much, Sue.
And then also, does the task force going to have an opportunity to review that survey?
Absolutely.
Okay, so would that happen at the next meeting?
Hopefully before.
Okay.
Yeah. Because we want that survey, we want folks to give them almost like a month to respond to it, just because of so many reasons. They need a fairly decent time frame. So we need to get that going ASAP. Yep, thanks for that, Sue. That's great. Yeah.
Sue's question brings up another question. You talked about the need to just review the public comment and just sort of note if there's patterns or high-level takeaways from it. Does it make sense to put that on the agenda as part of the takeaways next time?
Sure. Do it as a group or have someone do it in the interim and present it?
Okay, did this, Christie. Okay, so you're trying to get all the public comment in a spreadsheet and feed it, so at each meeting you could just have a very quick review of a couple of high-level themes.
Okay, that's good.
Thanks.
That's good.
Great. Well, if we are all set with that, it's 5 minutes before 3. I'm ready to, Kim, did you have a question?
I was just going to say, in the survey category, the commissions survey,
where does that stand and this body's input to that and drafting and that, because that I understand to be a survey, not just for board members, but for literally anybody who would like to weigh in on their sentiment around redistricting.
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I can answer that question because we were at the commission last week. So I can update and please fill in any gaps, but Afton did present at that commission meeting. They were virtual and they presented sort of a first stab at a survey. We had a discussion around it. We started doing like a group edit, which was not fun. And I think they decided they were going to go and work on it on their own and keep the questions kind of high level and as accessible as possible. They're going to bring it back to the commission, and it would be great if we could see it too when it's sort of in a quasi final form. And they're also going to be doing some outreach, face-to-face outreach. And I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't think that's been determined. But just to know that the ball is rolling in that regard. And we'll keep you posted as best we can as we learn more from the commission. Is that, Kim, did I miss anything?
Yeah, no, I think that I would just love for whatever we can do to make clear what surveys are in the universe, what they're helping to inform, even thinking about our engagements. And I think there's like 5 upcoming additional opportunities for public input with the commission's work. So we have these concurrent bodies of work happening in different bodies of oversight that will help elevate thoughts and concerns. And I'm thinking it could be very confusing for the public. So whatever we can all collectively do to help people know where to weigh in without having them bear the burden of having to make sure they've weighed in, 8 different times to be heard.
Good point. We don't want to confuse people. We do want to provide them with many opportunities to give input. So we will do our best to make that as clear as possible moving forward. It's definitely a work in progress, but hopefully on the 29th, we will have some good talking points around engagement that will be more specific. And because we really do need, I do feel like the month of October needs to be the big engagement month so that in November we can start putting a bow on that report at some point. So, great. Anything else? All right.
Well done.
So, oh gosh, well, it's not over yet. Public comment. We are at that portion of our meeting and let me get oriented here. And I will cede my seat. If there's someone in the room who does want to speak a public comment, I will simply move and give up my spot here. So just to remind folks, public comments will be limited to no more than 2 minutes per person. We're so happy to have your input, but we'd like it to be as clear and concise as possible. The task force requests that participants clearly state their name, their place of residence, and the topic of comment. The task force will take no action on items raised during public comments, and dialogue exchanges will be for clarification. However, we will have the option of having sort of a reflection period. Is I guess what we'll call it. The task force requests that comments be sent in writing to adm.redistricting@vermont.gov. And then we're going to have a quick recap after the public comment as well for action items. Anyone in the room? Yes. Come on up.
Hello, thank you. Before I begin, I just wanted to, my name's Jeannie Albert, and I'm Chair of the Lincoln School District Board. I just wanted to clarify because the board, the Lincoln Board, did pass a motion that was sent in for public comment, but I'm not going to be addressing that now, though I do encourage you to read it, and it's about our intent going forward. What I'm going to read is a public comment submitted by the Rural School Community Alliance. I am a steering committee member, and the topic is community democracy and education. My glasses decided to explode during the meeting, so I'm going to have to hold them.
Start your 2 minutes.
Thank you. Okay. As Vermont works to implement Act 73, our school boards are crucial, offering their experience, commitment, and connections at little financial expense. They act as a vital conduit to their communities. Further, when it comes to local democracy, the SU model is the best for walking the talk. Especially in low population areas separated by distinct communities and geographic challenges, SUs facilitate united action while allowing for local differences. They are the right scale and structure for rural Vermont. Supervisory unions operate based on mutual respect and trust built between the member boards and administration. By hearing diverse perspectives and enhancing communication and fostering creativity, the SU model strengthens resilience, adaptability, and shared purpose. Schools work best when our communities are involved. And within SUs, effective public engagement is embedded in how school districts operate. In Vermont scale, rural school districts, decision-making takes place close to the child and in service of education, not in a removed and centralized way buffeted by politics. Authentic, organic community relationships are at the heart of improved problem-solving and wise decisions. And when our schools succeed, our communities celebrate together. That concludes my summary. I didn't read everything, but I just wanted to add, because I know I have a few more seconds, that we also included some charts and a very preliminary analysis that I've done around comparing per pupil spending in the SU and merged SD models, as well as some comparisons relative to size. I see that as a kind of caution, an easy way to see that some assumptions that we might have about both of those things, whether the SD is more efficient or bigger is more efficient, is a good way to look at that. So I hope it's useful.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room?
You may later.
Yeah, sorry, Jen. Come on up. We have someone else here today for public comment.
Thank you for yielding your chair.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for being here.
Sure. Hi, my name is Elliot Berg. I live in Middlesex, and yesterday my wife August and I filed an electronic public comment with the task force. And I'm here just to underscore 3 of the points from that letter, if I could. The first is a plea to avoid the closure of local elementary schools wherever possible. So as you are thinking about consolidation plans and maps, these schools are the heart of our communities. My wife and I moved to Middlesex 43 years ago, largely because of the school there for our kids. And our son moved up to Warren 2 years ago from Washington, D.C. with his family for a similar reason. So this is really important. You pull the school out, it undercuts the local economy and social cohesion and so on. Secondly, we followed the debate over H454, and there did not seem to be very much hard evidence that consolidation in general reduces costs. And in some areas, for example, increased transportation distances for students, it can increase costs. This is not to say that some aspects of consolidation are not good. There's been mention made of the BOCES model and pooling special ed resources and that kind of thing. Also making greater opportunities for kids at the high school level to access specialized programs in other schools. All of that is good. But the last point is that if you are looking at maps and consolidation plans that do not clearly reduce costs, where you can't say this will address the tax issue that came up most recently in Vermont, then we would respectfully ask you to inform the legislature of that and just say it can't be done. Okay, I know that's outside your mandate, but a proposal.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And you did submit your testimony in writing, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Anyone else in the room here for public comment? Okay, let's move to online. I see some hand, at least one hand. Yes. John Castle, you'll be up ASAP. There we go. That looks good.
Great.
John.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
I am John Castle. I'm the Executive Director for the Vermont Rural Education Collaborative. I live in the town of Holland, and I wanted to speak to redistricting as a whole. Thank you for dedicating your time and energy to this impossible task. Whereas I respect the work of the task force, I feel it's important that I share my strong disapproval of the path we are on towards state-imposed school district consolidation. I have 4 points to share with you today. The research on state-imposed school district consolidation does not demonstrate the results in the promised cost savings nor improved student outcomes. Without evidence to support redistricting, it appears this endeavor is entirely based on wishful assumptions, hard for Vermonters to accept given the magnitude of change considered. We'd be better off devoting incentives and technical assistance to SUs, supervisory unions, that is, and supervisory districts to explore mergers on a case-by-case basis. We have, number two, we have 52 supervisory unions and supervisory districts in Vermont, whereas there may be reasons and opportunities for some mergers across Vermont. Our school governance units are not outside the norms of other rural states. New Hampshire has 107 SAUs, Maine 118 districts, Massachusetts over 300, Minnesota 331, Wisconsin 421. Many rural states have small rural districts with fewer than 2,500 students. Minnesota, for instance, has over 65. The desired number of 4,000 to 8,000 students is not practical given our rural context and geography. Although SUs need to be considered as a viable governance structure, both they and supervisory districts will demonstrate diseconomies of scale if they are too large. Please, let's not deceive the public. Larger supervisory districts with voting wards are intended to hasten the closure of small schools. Please be honest with the public that much of Act 73 is to centralize authority into bigger administrative units and at a state level. Mega districts and a loss of voting on school budgets will further disconnect the public, ultimately diminishing support for our public schools. Number four, a failure of the legislature to understand school governance more as communities rather than solely organizations has resulted in poorly crafted public policy. We will create an unreasonable level of disruption in our attempts to implement a misconceived redistricting process.
John, that's 2 minutes.
That will distract.
That's over 2 minutes.
Can I just, I'm almost done. Central offices and schools from the important work of improving learning outcomes for students. It is my hope that the task force, as you continue to dig into this work, you will recognize both the intended and unintended negative consequences of imposed state district redistricting.
Thank
I
you,
hope you will
John.
have the courage. Thank you for my time.
Thanks very much. Much appreciated. We'll move on to the next person, please. I just see an A. Ashley. Ashley, are you unmuting? There we go.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Ashley Wu. I live in Norwich, Vermont. I'm the chair of Thetford Academy, and I'm here advocating for the consideration of independent academies in the redistricting process. I will submit this letter after my presentation, and I'm going to give an abridged version of that letter now. We are submitting this letter with the hope that it will help inform your decision-making and that the final proposed map will allow Thetford Academy to continue to thrive as the designated secondary school for the town of Thetford and serve as a valued and sought-after option for sending towns without their own secondary schools. To give a short introduction to the school, Thetford Academy is the oldest secondary school in Vermont. It has an enrollment of 336 students in grades 7 to 12, of which 324 or 96% are publicly funded from Vermont or New Hampshire town tuition. It is the designated middle and secondary school for the town of Thetford and has open enrollment for all other students. It has the capacity to serve up to 400 students and has done so in the past. It is governed by a board of no larger than 21 trustees, which includes an elected representative from the town of Thetford, and all board meetings are open to the public and follow open meeting laws. We present at the Thetford Town School District annual meeting, and we follow education quality standards for the state of Vermont. TA sees stellar results, both academic and extracurricularly. Upon graduation, TA students go on to attend top colleges and universities or land impressive professional job placements thanks to strong vocational partnerships. Additionally, our top-notch robotics team qualifies for the World Championships every year, and our track and baseball teams won state championships just this past spring. In short, Thetford Academy delivers. However, we are concerned that the school faces a potential existential threat through the redistricting process. Thetford Academy would not be able to sustain our current robust program without students coming from choice towns. Currently, the enrollment from the town of Thetford stands at only 162 students, the lowest in our modern history. This is not due to Thetford students attending schools elsewhere, but a result of the town's shifting
That's 2 minutes, Ashley. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. We have DG up on deck.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Hi.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. DG, Dr. Mary Gannon. I have been involved in educational equity work in the state of Vermont for over 25 years and have also been following the work of around this education transformation bill from the beginning as well. So I just want to raise a couple of quick points. One thing that many of us have been voicing our concern with from the beginning with the commission that I'd like to share with you all is that there's been a very obvious lack of representation, diverse representation, starting with the commission. And so I would really encourage, as you are moving forward and thinking about the issues of gathering public input, thinking about who the stakeholders are and where the missing voices have been in this conversation since the beginning, to really think well about how public input has been, how you're going to construct public input and how you will get those voices at the table. One of the things that we noticed when we were watching the listening sessions and public input with the commission was the poor attendance. So the public is a little burned out, but I also believe that the people who need to be at the table are not being invited there. The other thing I just want to share with you is a lot of my work, and for many of us, is around equity, educational equity, and the Social Equity Caucus in the last few years put together something called the Probing Equity Questions. Some of you at the table may know about these. I would highly encourage you to look at those probing equity questions as a framework for how you're thinking about the issues of equity as you start to think about the task in front of you, because it feels like it's been a framework and a lens that's been deeply missing from the conversation. We know that hazing, harassment, and bullying is a significant issue in our schools right now. And one of our major concerns is how the redistricting will also impact the amount of HHB that's happening, but also school districts and educators' ability to respond to that.
Yeah, Mary, that's 2 minutes. Thank you so much. I don't see any other hands because I think that's the same hand that was up before. So Elizabeth has a hand up. Elizabeth Burrows. Yeah, Elizabeth, go ahead.
Thanks. I am Elizabeth Burrows. I am a legislative representative from Windsor 1 for full disclosure. I'm also a school board member, parent, and resident of West Windsor. And I don't have a statement. I just would like to, at least not today, but I would just like to ask you all to take seriously into consideration transportation. And I don't mean the length of bus rides for children, because that's all moot if there are no buses. We have a terrible dearth of bus drivers right now. And in districts of 4,000 students or more, that's going to be worse. And further, we our busing companies are starting to be dominated by private equity firms, and those private equity firms are nationwide with branches in Vermont. And so I urge you to look deeply, or more deeply, or at all, into that, because it really could cause a lot of damage. And West Virginia and Maine both had to reverse their consolidation efforts because they did not look at transportation deeply and found that it was an impossibility after their consolidation had been complete. Thanks.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks for being here 2 minutes. Appreciated. Anyone else for public comment online? I don't see any hands. Okay, well then I would invite the task force to reflect on anything that you would like to reflect on in terms of what we just heard in-house in the room and also coming from online. Kim?
You're a school closure. And it's that resonates for previous comments we've heard as well. I think reference to opportunities under the SU model. I heard a private Thetford sharing their model as a designated school and with a representation of public domains, and a particular model that is theirs in meeting EQS and their role for Thetford as a town, but also the surrounding towns with tuition. And I heard loudly the lack of representation. We share in identities at this table and how we are sure to make that central to our considerations in engagement. And the forever transportation concerns, for sure.
Thanks, Kim. Anyone else want to reflect on what we've heard today? Jen?
Yeah, I heard a couple of comments about data, and I'm wondering if when we get written reports and people cite data, or they cite statistics but don't have the source of the data, if there's a way for us to ask for that, or we should just let it go.
I mean, I think that's a good question, and I've had it as I've been reading the public comments as well and the testimonials, because it's, I mean, it's one thing to say something and it's another thing to really have it backed up in data and, vetted sources and resources. And as a former librarian, that means a lot. So I don't know, how are folks feeling about that sort of footnoting? Yeah.
I'm always,
Jay.
anytime someone cites research, I mean, I've had an actual researcher sit in front of me and tell me that, well, we both know that research can tell you whatever we want to say. But I would assume that in the legislative process in the run up to passing Act 73, that some research was done on redistricting. If it wasn't, in response to some earlier public comment, I've just gone online to try to do a little more research on redistricting efforts and find it to be extremely mixed, like a lot of topics. If we wanted to, I mean, do we have the resources to have somebody do a quick lit review for us so that we can respond when someone gives you one study that supports their point of view? Could we just, I mean, there've been well over 100.
The word quick is one that gives me pause, because I've relied on the researchers at UVM before, and they're fantastic, but they don't generate the information, quickly necessarily. So I would be happy to tee them up with a bunch of data requests. It would take time. I think the state library is someone that we might be able to rely on to get some other sources of information and research. So
Quick AI review, maybe.
It's a good question. Let's think about it and maybe talk about it some more on the 29th, but did you want to add anything?
Well, I was just thinking in the context of us talking about how some of the data that we've seen is not correct.
Yeah.
And if people pull that down and use it and it's not correct data, perception is reality.
Right.
And so just how to navigate that.
Right. Okay, thanks. Yeah, Kim.
One of the other things that struck me is something Jen said earlier, that we've had little conversation here around what equitable opportunities for our students would look like and what are those opportunities. Because if we are only looking at the cost drivers in an SU or otherwise, like the to whatever data or reports we get claiming one thing or another, I think we don't know necessarily what it is that is being either offered or sacrificed at whatever cost. Because I think we said it before, we can meet the cost, but it will likely diminish the opportunities for students. So I'm not sure that I think it would be really helpful to think about what the range of offerings are at middle level, at high school level, when we're thinking about central, middle, and regional high school. What would we expect for educational opportunities in those models? They might exist some places,
right?
They might not, but I think that might offer us some context and honestly be helpful for everybody to understand. We only know what we know in our own
It seems outside of our purview, and yet we are supposed to be drawing maps that increase opportunities for all students in the state of Vermont. So it's a weird conflict. Yeah.
I think that I don't know if that sort of inventory of what exists at different sizes and different central, middle, regional high school, local, elementary. Like, I'm just trying to get to that thing that is in law that we are supposed to be centering as we're doing this work and help inform what this looks like, not just by a cost metric.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Any other reflections? Great. Well, in that case, I don't know, Sue, are you prepared to give us a quick recap of action items?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll try to go quick.
Thanks.
I collected ideas in 3 areas: map making, report writing, process. So for map making, I have that and you'll all have to tell me, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say Dr. J and so I'm saying first names, but happy to change that. I have Jay and Beth are going to refine those problem statements and update the template. I have that all task force members are going to review the template, the blank template, and come to the next meeting with any comments. And Jay and Beth are going to prepare a refined mapping template for the next meeting. I have that Jay and Rebecca are going to create a BOCES map using the template. And then Martine and Edie are going to review and share JFO information. And that the AOE and ADS are going to attend to some of the data requests that were generated during this meeting. Anything else related to maps?
Can I ask a question? Were you guys gonna have a CTE map for us next time?
Scott and Dave CTE.
Great. Report writing, the thing I have there is Jen's going to write some Around public engagement, AOE and Martine are going to work on tech issues for next time. We're going to start a practice of just briefly reviewing some high-level themes from the written public comments that we get between meetings. The task force has agreed that if the SBA has a survey for them, they're going to review it for the next meeting. And Martine is going to talk with them and ask them to send it to everyone and not just their members. For public hearings, it sounds like the group agreed that Oxbow and Rutland are good places, and then Wendy was going to come back with a suggestion for a southern site. I will work with people who are interested in coming to the next meeting with some suggested purpose and process for the public hearings, keeping in mind some of the discussion that we had. Anything that I missed?
The Oxbow and Rutland, was that for our meeting or the public hearings?
For the public hearings.
And then, do you want to put somewhere to get these for everybody?
Yes.
I talked to Chelsea and she said they'll be out in a couple weeks. It's just a directory of all schools, and on it, it has the district, the towns of the district, whether they're supervisory unions, it has that approximate number of students. People have these.
I would like the committee one with my
So who is going to help? Yeah.
I will do that. I don't know, I'm feeling remiss in not talking about a public hearing in Chittenden County or in my, like the northwest of the state. I don't know. I'm just wondering if I'm going to get in trouble for that. I have not suggested it. That would be a fourth public engagement meeting. And I'm trying to, I mean, it's 2 hours from, you know, where we are to Rutland. I'm trying to figure out what the distance, the time is to Oxbow from Burlington.
Well, and it gets further for Grand Isle County and
Right.
the western portions of Franklin County to consider any of those places.
Town. St. Yeah, like St. Albans or, I don't know. Yeah. How would folks feel about that? All right, well, we'll,
I would say if we can handle four,
yeah,
for the sake of putting the four
Mhm.
corners.
Okay.
That would be appreciated.
right, well, I'll work on that with Sue. Great. Well, if there's nothing else, Edie, do you have anything you'd like to add at this point?
I think you did a great job and I appreciate you doing all of the heavy lifting, and I'm so sorry that I'm not there, but I think as you can hear from my voice, none of you wanted to be in the room with me today.
No, thank you very much for not being here. We appreciate it. And with that, I will adjourn the meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
you, everyone.